Hi, I'm Eugene Roehlkepartain. I'm delighted to be with you. I've been working with partners in Bartholomew County, many of them you know, in the schools, in the community, and then others around the world who are thinking about child well-being and how do we promote child well-being. As you'll know, there's so many challenges that we can think about with young people, and so many ways we've talked about young people and their problems, about at-risk youth, about the different crises they face, about delinquency, and most recently we spent a lot of time studying what we call adverse childhood experiences. And there are so many things we can be concerned about regarding adverse childhood experiences. And often people will say you have to have a crisis for people to respond and take action. And that's really been a lot of the way we frame child well-being, is sort of how do we think about that and what are the crises we need to solve. What we've learned, though, from people like Frameworks Institute in Washington, D.C., is that when we frame children's challenges around their problems and around these crises, what it actually triggers is people feeling immobilized and overwhelmed by those challenges. And it triggers other messages as well. It makes us think about it, so it must be other people's kids, those few bad apples something's gone wrong with them, or it's all on parents, that parents must be wrong, parents must be bad, or it's too late, there's nothing we can do now, it's just, so that we just give up on kids really early, or the problems are so big that we get afraid and frozen because we say no kids are okay, no kids are safe, no kids are whatever. And so it really actually, these messages can backfire on us, and people, rather than getting motivated, they actually get compassion fatigue, and sort of they become traumatized themselves in some way. So we need a different set of message. We need a different kind of data. We need to still tell an accurate story to say kids have challenges and that there are things we can do that are hopeful. And that is actually an accurate message. And so our group has come together to begin to say, along with many others, that we need a different kind of message. We need to say, be able to say accurately that all young people have great potential, and all of us have a shared responsibility and capacity to make a difference with young people. And yes, chronic stress from poverty, from discrimination, from many other things leave lasting scars in young people and families' lives. But we can do things together to support them, to give them resilience, to then lead fulfilling lives. And then we can even do more to eliminate sources of that chronic stress and prevent those problems from happening in the first place. And so that's really where we are. It's where we're focused today, is how do we begin to focus in that direction, to shift from overcoming the challenges to focusing on creating well-being for young people. And that's what we're focusing on. How do we develop a measure that tells that story as well? So we're developing a survey based on already validated instruments that have been used with many thousands of young people across the United States and around the world. We'll be measuring adverse childhood experiences and bias and discrimination, and actually how young people have dealt with COVID as one of the pieces of this. And that's a measure that's been used thousands of times. With what have you experienced around in your family and other experiences of neglect, and how have you been treated because of who you are in terms of your race, ethnicity, and other background. We need to know that stuff. We need to know the challenges that young people have faced in their families and in their communities. We also want to know about their relationships in their lives, because we know that relationships are critical. They're the roots of successful development. And so what do we know? How are their relationships with their families, their teachers, other adults, their friends, around how they express care, challenge growth, provide support, share power, expand possibilities, the kind of work that Search Institute is now focused so much attention on around the kind of relationships they have. Third, we want to look at their developmental assets, their support, empowerment, boundaries, how they use their time, the kind of internal strengths, commitments, and values that they're developing to thrive in life. Those are critical foundational building blocks of development that have been studied around the world. And then finally, how do those tie into the kind of outcomes that we want around social emotional competencies and how they're doing in school particularly? So those are all parts of a larger picture of well-being for young people. And if we can study them all together, we can begin to tell a more rich story about the young people's lives. So what will that look like? So in an ideal world, we would say adverse childhood experiences would be very low. They'd have few of those, and then they would be much better off in terms of higher relationships, assets, and have really high outcomes, good outcomes as a result. In reality, you have more kids who would be somewhere in the middle, maybe a few adverse childhood experiences, and they'd have an average range of relationships and assets and decent outcomes. In reality, we're going to have, and then if we do that, then if you increase their assets and relationships, the outcomes would increase. That would be our goal, right? That's our hypothesis. And the good thing about that is that you can actually change the assets and relationships because those are malleable factors. We can be intentional about the relationships and the assets and the opportunities we provide to kids. The reality is, though, we also know there's too many kids who have high adverse childhood experiences and that they've been neglected or don't have enough relationships and assets in their lives. But those are things we can work on. Those are things we can think about and be intentional about uh, strengthening the relationships and assets for all kids and being really inclusive, ensuring that every young person has access to those things. So if we can do that, if we can increase the relationships and we can increase the developmental assets in their lives, can we then also see the outcomes improve, even though those adverse childhood experiences have already happened and we can't take those away, but the relationships and assets can buffer the impact of those on young people's lives. We're starting here in Bartholomew County. And we've got people who are interested in taking this across different parts of Indiana. And beyond that, we've got people across the country who are watching and being part of the conversation. And then, as I said, people around the world. So it's starting here and it's going to grow. And we're thrilled to all be part of it here. And it starts here, and the goal here is to remind ourselves that even as we have this bigger picture in mind, every young person has a story, and we need to start and remember that. And these surveys are designed to help us begin to listen and learn in new ways to every young person and their story. So thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful training.